so frustrating hearing about people getting ripped off when it comes to shore excursions. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you my methods, tips, tricks, and tools, and advice on how you can secure yourself the best possible shore excursion for what you want to do and at the best possible price. If that interests you, stay tuned. You don't want to miss it. Welcome to our next adventure with me, Jason. Let's not waste time and dive right into it. Step one is to realize that in most cases, the cruise line is going to be the worst option when it comes to booking a shore excursion. They're going to be your worst case scenario. And so they're your backup of your backup of your backup if you want to guarantee that you're going to do the shore excursion that you want. However, like I said, that's my running assumption. We're going to prove that kind of throughout the way. And at the end of this video, to be fair, I am going to speak about the two different cases where I could think that using a cruise line to book a shore excursion is perhaps the best option. But again, it's quite specific. So we'll touch on that and give them a fair shake at the end of this. Step two is going to be to go and look on the cruise line, preferably that you're going to be using, website where they are doing the shore excursions, or if it's on the app, Now, like I said, we're ideally not going to end up using the cruise line because you're going to see they're probably not the best option. However, it's a nice thing to not start with anything, right? You want to have some inspiration. So I always go there and check things out and get some sort of reference. So we're going to be using a case of a cruise that I had gone on with Virgin Voyages where I went to Santorini. So on Virgin's website, I'm going to go to the shore excursion thing. I'm going to go to Europe. I'm going to go down to where it is Santorini. And I'm going to look. Now, I always say find 3 things, hopefully, that interest you. But for the sake of time, I'm just sticking to 1 for this video. So in this case, I'm looking at the volcano and hot springs. Now, once I've got that, if that's what I actually want to do, and I think, yeah, this is great, I'm going to take what information I can. And remember, this is me already having a basis. Like I said, this is going to be our worst case scenario, but we're going to hopefully improve on this down the road. So what do I know so far? Yes, you can read all the lovely marketing stuff that they're putting out there to try to get you to buy it and say that it's the best thing you could ever do, even though everything else is the best thing you could ever do. Okay. And you're going to look at whatever valuable information you can get. In this case, how long is it? And if the price is listed, what they're charging. With that, we're ready to move on to step 3, where we're going to refine and get a better outcome. So let's move on to step 3, which is going to be that initial refinement. And in many cases, it's going to be the only refinement that you do. There's some alternatives you might want to use just to check yourself. But in my experience, this website and tool has been the most powerful and ultimately the one that I've ended up using in most cases for shore excursions. But I will provide others to, again, do your due diligence and to check yourself just in case. And that is to go and use Viator. Viator is a TripAdvisor company, and it is fantastic, not just for cruises, but for any sort of activities you may want to do in a particular town, city, and location. So using the information we have, we're going to try and see if we can find the same shore excursion being offered, in this case by Virgin Voyages. So number 1, let's start with the basics. Santorini is the location, and the date would be the 4th of August if I'm doing the 3rd to the 10th of August sailing in 2025. And I see immediately already, actually, the thing I'm looking for ends up being the best value, one of the best offers. But let's pretend yours wasn't. So what else do I recommend you do? Use the filters. So I'm going to now use Viator's filters to try and best reconstruct the framework that I see being presented to me by Virgin Voyages. Namely, of course, it's going to be in English. It's going to be 3 hours long, and it's going to cost at most $120. So I'm just going to adjust all of that and then click search. Suddenly, you're going to see, wow, we have reduced the search options, but there's still a fortune to go through. So let's try even further. I'm going to go back into the search thing and type in volcano or volcanic. And suddenly you see something comes up. In this case, I click. I have now only 4 or 5 options or whatever to choose from. And I go based on which ones had the most reviews and the highest rating. The highest rating is important, but if it's only based off of 5 reviews, of course, it's going to be easy to make a fraudulent review or get all your friends to go write a 5-star review. But 1,000 plus or however many plus, it's harder to fake that. And there's going to be tons of more information, reviews, and pictures to look at. So I always recommend to find that balance between the best price, highest reviews and rating, and a number of reviews. So I'm going to pick that one that's about $36. And we go into it. You can check me on this. You're going to say to yourself, I know already, oh my God, how can it be that this costs $36 and Virgin's charging $120? That's crazy. But for argument's sake, by the way, it's worth noting that there is an extra €5. In this case, read what's included and what's not included. The extra €5 is for the actual hike and tour on the volcano that you have to pay in cash there. So for all intents and purposes, let's mentally round this up to $40 and pretend a $1 is the same. Okay, it's not, but let's go with it. You might be saying, how can it be that this is 67% less than what the cruise line's offering. And yeah, that's just the reality. They are really ripping you off on most excursions. So be very careful about that. You might think, okay, but hold on, Jason. This is like very academic. I know you said you went here, but was it actually the same one and the same quality that the cruise line was providing? Yes, it was, because when I went, people who were coming from the same ship as me ended up being escorted by the cruise line to the service provider. We all ended up on the same boat, and there were some awkward, angry shocks when people found out how much I paid and how much the cruise line ripped them off with. But that's a story for another day. You can go watch my video on that cruise if you're interested. Now, that is a situation that I recommend would be most of the time your stopping point. But like I said, it's important to always check yourself. So what I recommend you do is use other websites as well. So for example, there's Get Your Guide, very similar to Viator, except I think not as pro-consumer, and also has never, in my experience, had a better price and better deal than Viator. So that's why I'll mention it so you can check yourself and have more tools available to you. However, in general, Viator's always been better. Another very popular one with cruises is something like, for example, shoreexcursionsgroup.com, and there are many similar websites like this. It's very convenient to use, and that's why people like it. You can go onto it, you put in the name of the cruise line, your ship, it will then have the dates, you click search, and it brings up your itinerary. You can click on each port, and it'll show you all the excursions that they're offering. Now, an important thing to be aware about this option is, number one, it's involved in some very shady stuff, not just particularly shoreexcursionsgroup.com, but many other similar sites. And again, the shady thing is not coming from them. It's actually coming from people like travel agents and some of the big YouTube channels out there. I'm going to be discussing that in a future video. So if you're a travel agent, you might want to make sure that you watch this in case I'm calling out on something you're doing. And if you're not a travel agent, you're a regular person like me, well, you might want to make sure you're aware of this so you can look out when sometimes people seem like they're helping you, but they're really helping themselves. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed and you are hitting that bell icon. But let's continue. So first things first, you'll see that most of the time, this website and many others will always offer excursions cheaper than the cruise line. And we're going to use my same cruise that I've been using in this example to see if that's the case. So we're going to put it there, and then all of a sudden I see, what do I notice? Well, they are actually offering the hot springs, etc., but less than Virgin, but still way more than what we saw on Viator. So very often the cases you'll find on this website, it's 5%, 10%, maybe 15% less if they have that specific excursion. And that's because there's a lot of fat being built into the prices here for some of these dubious activities that I'll be speaking about in a future video. So that's why I say know about it. But again, you've got your options. Most of the time, Viator is the best thing. Step 4 is going to be a refinement of a very specific kind of excursion that is very popular wherever you're going if it's relevant to you. So it's even going to get you better prices in most cases, if not always, than Viator. So that's going to be if your excursion is focusing around a landmark, a ruin, a site, or a museum that is under the custodianship of a government, be it the national government or local government of wherever it is that you're visiting. If that is the case, what you want to do is then look for the government website of that museum site, etc., because usually they are then the only people who are legally allowed to sell you the entrance ticket, and all these other excursions are basically buying it from them and reselling it to you at a markup. Keywords to look out for are the skip the line and all of that. They're just saying you're going to skip the physical ticket line if you didn't already pre-purchase the ticket online. You can do it yourself and skip the line yourself. You don't need them. The only issue that then remains left if you're going to do this option is to then price and look into the logistics of getting you from the cruise port or wherever you are to that museum, etc., and back. So look for trains, buses. Maybe there are dedicated bus lines from the port there as part of a tourism initiative. Or maybe because you've got a group with you, it might make sense to split an Uber, hire a car. You're adults, you can figure it out. But that's something that you should always be aware of. Anyway, moving on. As promised, we're also going to discuss when should you consider using the cruise line for your shore excursion. There's only about a couple of options where that actually is applicable. But before I mention that, there are some things we want to clear out about using the cruise line. The most common misconception is that the ship won't leave without you if you book it through the cruise line. You can go onto Google and type in on many different times where the cruise line did leave passengers behind who did book an excursion through the cruise line. The only thing that will happen is that they will then cover the cost and arrange for those passengers to meet at the most convenient next port. So this idea that the ship will wait for you, no, there's plenty of evidence out there that the ship won't wait for you, but they will just then sort out the annoying way that you're going to end up having to go and meet them at your next port. So there goes that. The other thing that people might say is, well, the money's not a problem for me, so I don't care booking it through the cruise line. Well, you should, because as I've proven and as you can find in many cases, it's not necessarily about the cost. You could end up finding the same shore excursion with something else at the same price, but the experience is way better. Things are more tailor-made to you. You can spend more time as you please and wish at certain parts of the trip, or maybe even, again, ask them to create some sort of bespoke guided tour for you. So it's not necessarily all about the money, it's also about your time budget. And everyone has a time budget no matter what their banking situation looks like. So keep that in mind. When would you want to consider actually using the cruise ship for your excursion? Well, the one that is unfortunate is going to be if there is a port you're going to that involves using tenders. For those who don't know quickly, a tender port is one where, for whatever reasons, the ship cannot actually dock in the port. It has to dock a little bit away, and then they use either lifeboats or they hire ferries to basically take guests from the ship to shore. Now, when that happens, you typically have to book in advance the tender time. So it doesn't cost you anything extra, but you have to book it in advance. They usually open up those reservations online, and they typically dish it out in a tiered system. So it's either going to be people who are staying in suite categories first, like certain suite categories and above, get first pickings, and or people who have a particular loyalty status and above will get first pickings. After that, it's going to come down to the general public, and obviously there's limited spaces for each slot, and then only after a certain time do they open it up for anyone as a free for all, first come, first serve. So if you want to do an excursion not with the cruise line at a certain time, shortly after you arrive, you do need to take into account two things. One, are you able to get a tender slot time that is early enough so that after you take into account getting from the ship to land and getting to where you need to meet, you're able to make it in time or not? And if you're not, you can do it with the cruise line, because they then guarantee anyone who books the excursion with them to have priority on the tender to make it on time, because otherwise they couldn't sell it to you. Lastly, the only thing I honestly could think of where you would want to consider doing it through the cruise line versus through someone else, and it's very much down to you knowing if this is the case, is if you have got onboard credit. Now, I can do a whole video on onboard credit, and I might do this one day, but onboard credit is something not to be happy with in general, because you've prepaid for it in some way, shape, or form, whether you're aware of it or not. It's not worth the face value. If they give you $100 onboard credit, it might be worth around $20 in cash or something like that. Again, story for another day. The main point is, if, for example, you have a drinks package and you have all these other things, there's just no possible way for you to spend that onboard credit given your current setup on the ship, then you may want to consider rather using that first to pay for an excursion and therefore through the ship, versus, for example, paying with another service provider that's not the ship. And this can sometimes seem a little bit weird. You might find an excursion on Viator, it's the same one for $50, but through the ship it's $100, but you have $100 of onboard credit. And so if you don't use that credit, it's worth nothing. And it's a marked up price anyway. So you'd rather use this imaginary monopoly money first, because it's going to be worthless to you when the cruise is over, and however much you don't spend is money left on the table, versus an additional cash flow out of your pocket of another $50, right? So the one involves no more cash flow and the other involves additional cash flow. That is really it. Some people do it because of convenience, etc., but I don't think it's worth it in that sense. You can have a better experience overall. Two final points I want to make so that you can get the most benefit out of all of this. Number one is, of course, I did mention earlier that there are some very shady things going on when it comes to shore excursions, and it could even be happening to you via your travel agent and some of the bigger names out there on YouTube. And I want to make sure that there's full transparency. So if you want to know what some of those shady practices are and how you can look out for them and become a more savvy consumer, then make sure you're a subscriber and that you hit that bell icon so that you don't miss when that video comes out. The last thing I want to mention is just paying it forward, right? If you have any tips and tricks that I didn't mention here that you think would be useful, please put it in the comment section below. If you've already done that, or you don't have anything to add, but you want to help other people in the same way that I might have helped you, then yes, it's going to sound corny, but if you aren't already a subscriber, please subscribe. If you found the video useful, give it a thumbs up. It projects this video out there so that more people can see it. And of course, even easier than all of that, if you've done that already, share this with your friends, family, and loved ones so they too can benefit, so they too can pay less, do more, and we can all go on many more adventures together. Cheers. Bye.